God does want us to be settled and secure in Him. Let me read from 1 Peter 5. It says, "But the God of all grace, who hath called us into His eternal glory by Jesus Christ, after that ye have suffered a while, make you perfect, establish, strengthen, settle you."
Welcome, friends, to Breaking Bread, the podcast brought to you by Apostolic Christian Counseling and Family Services. It's excellent to have you along as always. I've got Brian Sutter here with me. Yeah. Brian, hello.
Hey, Matt. Great to be with you. Thanks.
Brian, we're going to talk about the topic of insecurity, and would love to get right into that topic. And I might maybe set the topic up to say God has a lot to say about security, doesn't He?
Both speaks to and certainly brings into life for us, for sure. So security is, that's a central thing that God's about. And then when you contrast that with insecurity, and insecurity being something that we all experience, and when that comes up, we know what that means, at least to some degree.
Yeah. Speak more about that definition. How are we going to think about insecurity?
Yeah. I mean, I think at just a general level, it's that sense of fear or unsettledness or uneasiness. And so that can show up and actually be very important and helpful. Like, it's appropriate to feel insecure if you're standing on a ship that's not anchored to anything, or it's got a hole in the boat. Like, we should be like, oh no, and that should...
This is unstable.
Exactly, like to bring some concern. So we experience it at that level universally, but I think generally what we speak of, that where it gets into this place of concern, is insecurity that's more pervasive, and this big constant self-doubt or constant fear, or feeling like everywhere I step is unsettled, or in these particular areas that we'll maybe get into, just brings a lot of unsettledness about who we are and doubt about our ability to step into certain things.
So the first crossroads is knowing when we should be insecure, per your example.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
Maybe Jonah was totally secure when he shouldn't have been at the bottom of that boat, right?
Yeah, right. It begs the question of what do we find security in, and making sure that I think our human tendency, our flesh, tends to move towards hoping or putting security in things that actually can't hold us, and that's where we tend to fall and experience hurt. Part of that is God's faithfulness to moving us into what actually can hold us, and that's sure.
Okay, so we're now really talking about what it is that we should be secure in, and that's really an important question.
Yes.
So let's linger there a little bit. So I'm going to quickly speak out of my expertise in a matter of seconds, Brian. All right, when I talk about securities, financial securities, right?
Yeah.
And you hear the pundits say, no, if you want to be secure, you need to go to precious metals, and those are secure, right? And I told you I would go off of my expertise like right now.
Yeah.
But really what the pitch is, where are you placing your security? In that case, financial securities.
Yes.
And the analysis then revolves very closely around, okay, what is it in? So I want you to speak to that. Where do we place securities?
Yeah.
And I want you to think about a 12-year-old girl.
Right? Exactly.
I want you to think about an 18-year-old male.
Right.
I want you to think about a 65-year-old male. Paint us some of those things, because that's a lot of what's at stake here.
And I hope as even the audience hears some of those things that you're mentioning, that they're kind of going through their own checklist. What would with a 12-year-old girl? Oh, well, maybe the way they look or dress. Or if you're talking about a young man that's in high school, maybe it would be sports, or as you get older.
Yeah, their abilities, their physical abilities, for
the things that they're able to accomplish, or how they're perceived by others. And generally those things move as we work through the course of life, but they still are the same sort of function, that we look to them to be the thing that tells me I'm okay, or that I am secure. And, as you get older, those things tend to move into job or success in that environment, or finances, or how am I doing in my role as an employee or a parent, or what does different ones in church think of me, and so on and so forth. And we kind of move from one thing to another thing. And as we age, we look at that 12-year-old and say, what in the world? Why are they worried about what Johnny thinks of them? Yeah. And then we go to church and we get all bent out of shape around the same things. Yeah. And we don't realize we're actually putting our security in things that cannot deliver, and that continues to lead us to a place of feeling really insecure.
So what I hear you're saying here, Brian, is overcoming insecurity isn't the end necessarily, right? Take, for example, that young girl or that young man or me
Right.
who finally fits in a way that I feel secure. And I feel
Right.
like, okay, I settled this. I'm
Yeah.
secure now because I look a certain way or I feel a certain way or I'm
Right.
achieving a certain something.
Yeah.
It sounds to me like you're saying there is a better security to pursue.
Yeah.
Is that a true statement?
Yeah, there is certainly a better security, and to recognize that our natural tendency is to move from one thing that won't provide security to another thing. And that's a process rather than we don't necessarily get to a place of security and always stay there, but we will maybe find ourselves coming in and out of security. But if we keep going back to what is it that I can count on? What is it that can provide hope, can provide guidance or direction? And this, as we are speaking, I'm assuming for an audience that's going to be primarily believers, they're coming up with where we're going here.
But you've kind of redeemed insecurity in my mind,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Never before have I seen insecurity have a purpose.
Yeah, right.
And I think the way that you've just explained that, insecurity does have a purpose. How tragic would it be if I was completely smug, or maybe I should say snug, smugly snug,
Yeah.
in my realm of security and whatever I've produced in myself
Yes.
or fabricated that to be,
Yeah.
and never push towards the precious golds, right?
Yeah.
The precious metals.
Right, exactly. And so I do think in that way, we can look at insecurities as God's faithfulness to keep pushing us back to Him. And for us to be aware of what are the things that maybe are becoming those things that I get really wrapped up in and consumed in, and for that to redirect me like, oh, wait, you know what? Me being a really successful counselor, while that's a good goal, if that's the end and the place that I find my security and what people think of me and do they think I'm doing a good job, do they like me, if that's at the end of the day where I rest, I'm going to be all over the place on where I'm at as far as my security. And on those days that are particularly hard, for that to drive me back into a sure security, the precious gold. Like
Yeah,
you
for
said.
sure. And I'd just like you to even tease this out a little bit further, how we maintain that. Because having security in what you just said, I think is a healthy thing. I think your boss
Right.
is going to want you to feel competent about what
Right.
you do here at the office
Sure.
and have that sense of security. But you hold that with, I think, a really healthy and appropriate expectation for that security.
Right. Yep.
It's good insofar.
Right. Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
Because if you were to have an accident of some sort that made counseling impossible, then some things would unravel.
Exactly. That if that is what makes me me and the only thing that grounds me, then the loss of that is going to unravel who I am. So that kind of brings us into this space of where I think a big part of security and insecurity is identity. What gives us a sense of value and purpose and worth, whether I'm able to continue to do this job or whether I move from this role to a different role or whether I'm the best at this or I'm, below average at this. Can I still have a sense of worth and value according to the Scriptures and according how God views me? And the resounding answer from the Scriptures is yes, and we know that cognitively, but it's really hard to remember and hold on to that in the midst of life's bumps.
And what does that remembrance and holding on to look like?
Yeah,
You know what I mean,
yeah,
tangibly?
yeah.
Because I think we can all go there, like the assent, the mental assent that
Right.
says, yes, that's
Yeah.
where it's at. What does it look like to... as the financial advisors say, what you need to do is sign right here. You know what I mean?
Sure,
and
sure.
and we'll transfer these funds.
I think a big part of that is to recognize how insecurities attack us and what their goals are. I think insecurities are trying to convince us that I am only okay if I have this sense that I am enough, and if I look within myself, I have enough strength, I have enough power, I have enough, intelligence, I have enough wealth, I have enough success.
So in security, in the sense of what we're talking about here, very often, I'm thinking of the 12-year-old girl and the 18-year-old male and the 65, right, is happy with oneself.
Yes.
Is that a good definition for
Yes,
security?
yep.
Happy with oneself.
Happy with oneself, not because there's no flaws or mistakes or failures, but because we can be happy with ourselves even in the midst of those realities. Where insecurity says, nope, for me to be okay with myself, those have to be removed. or for somebody else to like me, or for God to be satisfied with me. All of these things have to be removed. Whereas security says, nope, I can be loved and valued even in the midst of not being good at this thing.
All right, so now it's exploded a little bit more of what actual security is. I can have a sense of security, but my degree of happiness with myself comes by way of all of these exterior things. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yep.
So in a sense, maybe I haven't achieved security like I perceive that I've achieved it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, I fit in. I'm
Yeah.
secure.
Right.
Well, I'm not really happy with myself. I'm happy with my
Yeah,
circumstances
yeah.
aligning themselves
Right,
as
and
such.
I'm feeling like I'm getting evaluated in a positive way, so therefore I'm secure. But again, that's a security that's based on something that's external, that's bound to shift, whether it's in the next moment or in the next day.
So this true security that you're positing here today is something very, very core.
Yeah, right.
We've used the happy with oneself. I liked how that,
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's that could be improved,
Yeah,
right? But
sure.
it makes sense to me.
And I think, too, it's grounded not in what we see within ourselves. It's grounded in something that's from outside, but that defines who we are. And so in that sense, it's not looking to Johnny or success or these other things. It's looking to who is my creator and what does he say about me? And in that, there is like a constant sure thing that is always present. And that creator from our worldview isn't going to be changing and isn't going to be fickle. It's sure.
All right, so here it is.
Okay.
Here's what occurs to me, Brian.
Okay.
In every pursuit of security, we are looking for self-affirmation.
Okay.
And the highest prize would be to be totally satisfied in oneself, completely secure, right? Right?
Yeah.
Being able to go to any event, look whatever the way you want to look, and be secure with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this complete self-satisfaction. But as you spoke to that, Brian, I'm not sure that's ever really possible.
Right.
Even if we say, oh, I've arrived to the point where I'm comfortable in my skin, there is a fan club out there that we look to say, yes, be comfortable in your skin.
Right.
So I've really just found a new family.
Yep.
I found a new cheer group
Right.
that says, be that way. Do you know what I'm saying?
I think you're exactly right. We just switch those voices that we listen to that are affirming where we're at. And that's, again, not where we're wanting to shift into. And that's where, too, one of the lies, I think, from culture is like, if I could just have more self-confidence or self-esteem, then that's what I need. And actually
It's elusive.
It's elusive. That's exactly right. It's elusive, and it won't pay off. And there's always going to be a message outside that says you're okay, and then it's going to switch to you're not okay. Right. That as we're scanning these outward inputs that we all do, and it's not even wrong. Like, it's important for us to think about, like, what does my spouse think about me, or my child think about me, or, a parent think about me, or my boss? Like, those are good questions to ask, but those are not the places that we can rest our security in. And so just to recognize when we are doing that, and when we're doing that, to not let that be the defining thing of how good I am, or if I'm okay, or if I'm not okay. Those things will always lead us into precarious places.
So this is what I learned.
Okay.
I learned that though I used to think security was a self-perception of myself that I'm happy with myself. I've come to believe and understand through this conversation that no, I actually listen to other people to tell me that. And I just look to a different group or find that group that is affirming. And you have just given us that God wants to be that voice.
Right.
That when I listen to him
Yep.
and listen to what he's saying, that's where security is found. Am I hearing that right?
Yep. And it sounds so good, and yet it's so tricky. Like, even if we think of the example of Moses, right? He's standing here before the burning bush, and God is speaking directly to him about what he's asking him to do and what he's calling him into. And Moses keeps looking inside and thinking, I can't speak well, and all of these sorts of things. So we look internally, do I have the skills to do this? And the answer is no. Or we look externally and are these people going to follow me or are they going to like me? And the answer is like, I don't know. Even in the midst of God speaking directly to us, it's so easy to discount that voice, the voice that's actually the truest and the thing that's actually going to be helpful. It's so hard to listen and latch onto it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we can't get out from underneath the need for others' voices,
Yeah.
I think that's kind of one of the takeaways, that we're never going to really get out from underneath that.
Yes.
We just grow up, and certain people don't mean as much as other groups do.
Right.
But we still have a role to play in speaking into the lives of others.
Yes.
Am I into my wife or my children or into
Peer
my
group.
neighbor's peer group?
Right.
Am I God's voice to them?
Yeah.
Am I saying a similar message that he would be saying to that person?
Yeah. Oh,
is
man.
an incredible calling.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. Yep. And that's where you're exactly right. If we can acknowledge these places where we do have insecurities, and then we can invite the community of believers to speak into that, what a beautiful thing. And I think, too, as we get opportunity to both be the voice that's speaking or to receiving it, to remember that if we just go, our tendency is to move into telling them why they're so great. But if we do that, again, we've fallen into actually helping them feel good about
that
themselves.
that other security standard.
Exactly.
It's not the precious metals.
Right.
It's these other goods.
No, you are really talented. Let me tell you why you're so good at this and why, you know what, you're better than this person at it. That's what it almost always tends to move into, comparing and trying to convince them that, no, you're okay, versus like, you know what, you're okay not because you're good at this, but you don't have to be a perfect mom and still be okay. You don't have to never make the wrong decision about where to invest your finances or whatever it is. Like that, you blew it. And that's okay.
And you're loved.
And you're loved. That's exactly right. There's that and piece that we can speak into, whereas our tendency is just to want to help them feel better and encourage them. No, you can do this. And all of those things that I think that are meant well. And sometimes we want to share that. But if our goal is to help convince them, you know what, you are the best, it'll fall flat.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really helpful. All right, Brian, I really appreciate this. God's view, ultimately, God is that audience, an audience of one, right? That speaks into us. But at the same token, we don't want to downplay the niches that we find ourselves in, right? The security that we find in doing what we believe we've been called to do and doing it well. Right?
Yep.
So let's go ahead and provide a good balance here. How should I be viewing these areas too, where it's like, okay, I get all that, but I want to be secure as a teacher.
Right. And I think in that, I'm excited that the Lord wants us to do what we do well. And that really the process of growth and trial and error is a really great thing that we can step into. And I think it's a really important part. That God doesn't say you've got to have this degree of expertise before you can be useful in the kingdom. He says, I want to grow you and use you where you're at. Whereas insecurities tend to say, until you have this level of goodness or expertise, then you're disqualified for service.
Okay, and that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's a really, really healthy and helpful lens, that the way insecurity is going to speak to me is based on a location. Are you currently located in a place where you can save face in this community? Whether it be in the teacher's lounge, whether it be at the career or the roles that we play, whatever. But you're saying, no. Security needs to be more evaluated on direction that I'm moving.
Yes.
And having a mindset of growth that's saying, I am growing into a teacher.
Exactly.
I am growing into motherhood.
Yeah, and just embracing that part of the journey. Whereas I think even in our culture now where so many things are public knowledge and failures and mistakes get really easily kind of broadcasted, that it can be really hard to just step into this space of I'm going to try and then I'm going to learn from those mistakes, I think it moves us into this place of, nope, I don't want to try. It's not worth it. This is really risky, and really trying to...
That I have to be perfect.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Brian, I'm a little insecure about how much content I can actually retain from this. So let's land the plane. What final closing comments do you have?
Yeah. The biggest thing that I would encourage people to think about is that you don't need to be more beautiful. You don't need to be more of an expert. You don't need to be more successful or more wealthy. Those things won't bring security. What we need is to move into trusting what God says about ourselves, as well as inviting our strengths and weaknesses into community of believers that can speak truth into us, that we can encourage each other, that we can allow for mistakes and failings, and that we can grow together through that and see it as God's faithfulness to turn us into and refining us into His people, rather than needing to have a certain mark or expertise before we can move forward.
I love that. And then we can experience the subtleness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the security that God wants us to have as His children, which I think is incredibly, incredibly exciting. Thanks, Brian, for sharing. Thanks, each one, for being with us today. We hope that this has blessed you.